Sudanese Sufi Figures, الشيخ فرح ودتكتوك, Part 3. Our documentary journey continues with Sudan renowned sage الشيخ فرح ودتكتوك, a man whose legacy has been perceived in popular memory through his remarkable wisdom, keen insight, and unforgettable sayings. His stories and anecdotes have been passed down from one generation to the next, remaining a cherished part of Sudanese folk heritage. Dear audience, it is my great pleasure welcoming you to our third encounter with Sudan, prominent man of wisdom, Sheikh Farah ودتكتوك. So in this episode we explore three remarkable incidents that vividly illustrate the depths of his wisdom and his unique ability to address the concerns of ordinary people. We begin with the story of a man fleeing from his enemies who sought refuge with Sheikh Farah. We then move to another incident that highlights the dangers of judging people solely by their outward appearance and using it as a measure of social status. Finally, we conclude with an amusing amount of a martial dispute, a common occurrence in family life, and examine how Sheikh Farah resolved it with his characteristic wisdom and wit. So you are very welcome, the audience, and join us once again in the company of the philosopher of Sudanese folk wisdom, Sheikh Farah ودتكتوك. Stay with us. So the audience, I would like to start this episode by having the man who sought refuge from his enemies. This is a famous and wide fame story among Sudanese, and the story informs that a man came running and asked Sheikh Farah to hide him from men who were chasing and wanted to kill him. Sheikh Farah simply asked the scared man to go and hide into a heap of sorghum cane. On their arrival, the man asked the Sheikh whether he had seen a running man, and the Sheikh replied he was hiding in the heap. The men thought he was a dervish, did not believe him, and resumed running. Coming out of the cane heap, the man asked Sheikh Farah why he told his enemies that he was hiding in the heap. And the Sheikh answered, if the truth does not save, the lying will not do so. So the lesson that we may draw from this story is that this story underscores the importance of truthfulness as a fundamental moral virtue. Sheikh Farah's judgment was based on the belief that a truthful person remains committed to honesty and will not resort to falsehood even under pressure or in difficult circumstances. The story teaches that truthfulness is a mark of integrity and trustworthiness, while lying weakens a person's character and credibility. In times of conflict and adversity, honesty remains the surest foundation for justice and human relationships. The audience, I would like to reminding you that I'm presenting Sheikh Farah ودتكتوك, sharing parts of his enduring legacy, targeting his wisdom, his saying, his keen insights. So in our second example, or the second example that I would like to share, is another noted wide fame story. Eat, oh my sleeve, before my mouth. So the story goes that Sheikh Farah was invited to a banquet hosted by one of the local notables. When he arrived at the house, however, the guards refused to let him enter because of his humble appearance, assuming that he was merely a beggar. The Sheikh quietly returned home, put on his finest clothes, and then came back to the gathering. This time, the doors were opened for him immediately, and he was received with great respect and hospitality. When the meal was served, the Sheikh stretched out the sleeve of his garment toward the food and exclaimed, "Eat, O my slave, eat, O my slave, before my mouth. كلي يا كمي قبال فمي." The guests were astonished and asked him why he was speaking to the slave. The Sheikh Farah recounted what had happened earlier and made him point clear the honor he was receiving was not for his character or wisdom, but for the clothes he was wearing. Through this simple yet powerful gesture, he exposed the folly of judging people by outward appearances rather than by their true worth. So what ought to be drawn from this story is that the lessons that be drawn from this famous story of the banquet exposes the danger of judging people by their outward appearances. Sheikh Farah's gestures demonstrated that the respect he received was directed toward his fine clothing rather than his character. The lesson is a timeless one. A person's worth should be measured by integrity, wisdom, and conduct, not by social status, worth, or external appearances. And then the audience, I would like to conclude in our third encounter with Sheikh Farah, having his practical wisdom through these practical incidents and events. And this is the third story that I would like to share the audience. The story of the broken pitcher and the martial dispute. In other words, the story of his younger daughter from her husband. So the third and final story in this episode concerns a martial dispute and conflict. The wise manner in which Sheikh Farah sought to resolve it. It has been related in Sheikh Farah ودتكتوك حلال المشبوك by the renowned Sudanese historian and researcher طيب محمد طيب. It has been narrated and related that his daughter once became angry with her husband and returned to her father's house, complaining about her husband and demanding a divorce. Sheikh Farah listened patiently to her grievances, comforted her, and calmed her anger. He then advised her in his characteristic poetic style, saying, أملي له جوفه وامسحي له خوفه وينباك الله يكفه. Fill his stomach, dust off his shoes, and if God wills, your father will provide what is needed. In other words, if your husband refuses to stay with you, then his evil deeds, Allah suffices you from him. Afterward, he spoke privately with his son-in-law, considering him in his own distinctive way, saying, أملال مصرانا وبرد له أضانا شوف أكم تطرانا. Fill her stomach, provide her with comfort and warmth, and see whether she will not remember us kindly. Yet, some time later, the daughter again complained about her husband. On this occasion, Sheikh Farah rose from his seat and walked away carrying a water pitcher. A short while later, he returned, appearing distressed, weeping and lamenting as though something terrible had happened. His daughter asked anxiously about the cause of his sorrow. With apparent simplicity, he replied, I am crying because my water pitcher has broken. His daughter was surprised and said, How strange, father. Why should you grieve so much over a broken pitcher? It is made of clay. You can easily find another. Sheikh Farah then answered with words of profound wisdom, tinged with sadness. I don't grieve because the pitcher is broken. Rather, I grieve because I have lost the picture that has seen my private parts for 7 years and faithfully kept my secret. I fear that if I replace it with another, it may expose anew what has long remained concealed. At once, his daughter understood the lesson hidden within the story, within this wisdom. She realized that her father was urging her not to abandon a long-established marriage lightly. For trust, familiarity, and shared secrets built over years are not easily replaced. Having grasped the wisdom behind his words, she returned to her husband's home, content and reconciled. For more information in this particular context, I'm referring you to طيب محمد الطيب الشيخ فرح ودتكتوك حلال المشبوك page 56. So the audience, what is to be taken out of this, to be taken as a lesson out of this story, is that through the metaphor of the broken picture, Sheikh Farah taught the value of loyalty, patience, and perceiving long-standing relationships. His lesson was that trust and companionship built over years of shared experiences and mutual understanding are precious and should not be discarded hastily because of temporary disagreements. The story encourages reconciliation, reminds us that enduring relationships require forbearance, wisdom, and commitment. So the audience, just I have shared 3 examples of lessons that reflect the wisdom of Sheikh Farah ودتكتوك. And this is, as I told, this is our 3rd encounter. In fact, we will continue with him having in each episode an example of the way that he followed as a philosopher, as a social reformer, addressing his time generation problems, which in fact, as I have stated earlier, that it is still living, it is still beneficial for the generation of today and the generation of tomorrow. That is because it is not more than a reflection of keen insight and experience with an experience of a person that seeing things differently, not through intellect only, but through insight. And this is a combination of the 2 virtues. The virtue of insight, that is al-basira, and the virtue of sight, that is al-basar. And together they constitute the duality that we have to follow in addressing our daily problems. Till seeing you in another episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.